Welcome back to the Dargo trip adventure, and today's video is going to continue the struggle to get over to Bull Plain Road, and we even get as far as Tambaritha Saddle. This part of the high country down below Mount Skeene, it just must have been hammered over this week with the weather patterns, because I've never ever seen it so wet as what it was down here. I expected it to be slippery when I come out, but wow, it was wild. And I was very lucky to have a lot of that water erosion to stop the Discovery from sliding off the side of the track downhill. Dropping into it was a pain in the neck sometimes, but other times it was it was very satisfying because the car was building up speed and very, very slippery. Oh, shit. I knew this bit here was going to be deep because there was no way around it, so you knew that all the big tyre crew would go through here as well. You can see just the side of that log there in the dry, you could have creeped around it, but all that was going to do if I went that way, because it's off angle, would have slid me in there sideways, which wouldn't have been pretty either. But I'd been through there probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I knew this side here where I've stopped now had a big step up out of it, where all the vehicles that come through here get stuck and then they spin up against the wall, so it's a pretty sharp jump up. It's nothing major. I could have went back and took a run at it and just bounced out of there, but being by myself, being in these conditions, it was choose wisely, and I just grabbed the winch and just pulled it forward rather than the start of the trip go and destroy the car and broke something on that big step up by hitting it at speed. The one thing I did notice when I bounced up there while I was editing it, the temperature was reading 38 degrees, and that's pretty crazy that I'd already been driving probably an hour and a half, but it was all downhill and just idling. And the 300 TDI's a really, really well-designed engine, and they were designed for, obviously, the military and combat in really hot zones overseas, so it's really, really hard to get a TDI hot even in the middle of summer. But when it's really cold conditions like this and you're not running the engine up in high revs, they really struggle to warm up. This is where this track starts to get a bit treacherous. You're starting to lose all the rock in the surface and it gets a lot of clay, and while it was as wet as this, it really was slippery. There's a lot of times where the back of the car was trying to pass the front of the car. We're pretty close to some of these big ruts on the slippery section that people that have been down this way would be familiar with. What makes this section particularly tricky in the wet, with the conditions of the track the way they are, it's reasonably steep. Now, there was times here I tried to stay up out of the ruts because a lot of them are quite deep, so you get the diffs hung up on them. So I did try and stay out of them, but it was just so slippery you were sliding back into them. And then there was some sections where I was trying to stay in them and then couldn't get back out of them when I needed to, when they got deeper down further. And I know I keep banging on, but it really is impressive how the Discovery goes down something as treacherous as this on a set of road tyres. One of the other advantages I had here is I just finished tweaking the suspension, getting that travel to work really nicely. So that was an advantage coming down some of this stuff as well, where it didn't get out of line where it would have in something that was a little bit limited in the travel. And one of the other things that were happening, and many people would have experienced it, but when the track's as treacherous as what it is at the moment, it's a real head scratcher, is that when you landed in the big puddles that are right in front of those water erosion traps that are across the track, what happens is they're so full that you come up against them, push the water over the top, and then the steep section over the other side, you've got a waterfall flowing as you're driving down it. It's just wild. So you can see what I'm coming up to, what I can see. I really would have loved to have stayed out of this because I knew I was going to get hung up. They're quite deep, but there's just no way to get out of them once you're in them because of how slippery it was. But in conditions like this, you're definitely better off in them, because if you do get out of them, there's going to be somewhere just down further that's going to slide you into them sideways, and you've got the possibility of rolling her over. Great if you're a dog, but not good if you're a Land Rover. So what's happened here, I had no control and I fell down into one of the big holes. I'm trying to reverse backwards here and try and get out of the hole and go down in a different way, because right in front of this, I know for sure that I'm going to land both axles on the side of a rut and be stuck. And can you see here off to the left, there's a path across there, but it's very off angle. So when you get down to where the middle of the center of the track again, there's a big risk of that turning the car around sideways because it was so slippery. So that's why I chose to go right down the middle of the rut and keep the vehicle as straight as I could. At this point here on this one, I should have went over. It was a little bit off angle over there on the right hand side, but I should have went over there and tried to travel as long as I could on it. But I knew once I got to about this point, that's it, I was committed. There was no reversing back. And I knew that I could see them getting deeper down ahead, and I knew that I was going to be stuck. I was stuck here and I did have to winch downhill, believe it or not, to get out of it. But the great thing was, we're all practiced, because just around the corner, it was the same thing. Now, it's very hard when I'm in the car and I'm telling you how muddy it is, but now we're out, you can get a real good idea. It's actually beyond slippery here. And it doesn't really matter what tyres you got on here. It's ice skating. I'm trying to stand up here. This is a real mission. Those familiar with the area will know that we're just about down at the Barkley River here. Let's try to wash some of the mud out of those beads. Now, that ended up being something that caught up with me just up here. I just had some lunch in here at the left. I was banging for a feed after the last 3 hours of coming back through there, but I still had to get out the other side. But I ended up taking the tyre off a rim, the front driver's side, when I was winching, because up here it just got so wet. There was sections like this one here where I was just bouncing up against the ruts, and there was so much mud in the beads that it was losing air. But I was pushing to get further up the track, and I thought, it'll be right. I won't put some air in it here, but it ended up getting me, and I took the tyre off the rim. And had to end up driving it a bit further up to somewhere where I could jack. Swearing. There's me looking at that tyre going, geez, that's nearly flat. Nah, I'll leave it. Just a little bit further up I'll go. At this stage here, what I'm doing is I'm trying to preserve the car a little bit. I'm not trying not to run it at things flat out and break it. And I'm trying to, I was going to winch over here, and then I just got so far up and I just went, nah, you know what? I'm just going to run at it rather than winch. It was too much hard work. This is literally like an ice skating ring here. You can see there's no rock in it whatsoever. It is just the slipperiest clay you can imagine. I get out the other side of this and no steering whatsoever. The back just rear wheel steer off into the bush. It just, yeah, wild conditions. And the other thing you can't see here, this is steep around this corner. That's why it's so flogged out. So you'll see I go up here looking for the lot solider ground, but the problem is it's just going to feed me back into the hole anyway. So just having a bit of a feel of it before I hit it hard. Now, this is usually the stuff of teenagers driving them into ruts this hard. Like what I'm doing there is I'm just slamming the diffs up into the bump stops because I'm hitting them at speed and they're so deep. All good fun if you're with 5 or 6 others like-minded friends, but when you're on your own and it's wet and slippery conditions, it's time to think smart and save the car, because that's the only thing that's going to get you out of there. Yeah, it's something that anybody can do. You know, you can have a nice, capable, light four-wheel drive and come out and do things like this by yourself, but it's not the sort of thing where you've never done it before and you just turn up with the local camping stores winch and all this stuff you've never used before, and then all of a sudden you're up against these sort of obstacles. You really need to have had some experience, know how your winch works, know where all your recovery gear is, and how to use it, more importantly. But you really need to plan for it. This part here, that last 20 odd metres, I was driving without the front tyre on the rim. I ended up just driving the tyre right off the rim, trying to get up to somewhere I could jack. And even this wasn't an ideal location, slipping and sliding in the mud, and the other side you're up against the bush. But I just needed to get it up to somewhere that was more level, that I could pull the tyre off the vehicle. I couldn't rear air up because I'd pulled the tyre off, but what happened was when I pulled the tyre off, I also pulled the valve out of it. So that was the end of that. Now, there's probably, I reckon, close to an hour just in this area and the next 100 metres up, because it was the next hairpin up and steep jump up was also just clay, rutted, deep, muddy water obstacles. So there was a lot of winching went on here. and when I got the tyre back on, and by this time I'd well and truly had enough of it, and the camera was sitting in the passenger seat off. Here we are, and we're heading across the Bull Plain Road. This is the last track that takes you through there, and this one is a rat marketer's dream. Waiting for some Incas or something to pop out here with some spears on a headhunting mission. Beep. It's just as well I give it an extra couple of passes when I was putting on that sand glow, I can tell you. When it's dry and the conditions aren't so bad, this is a really good way to come over the way I did. Like, say, if you're coming from Jamison, heading up over Mount Skeene and just dropping down the back way to the Barkly River and coming across here to Bull Plain. To get into North Lacola and Lacola, and obviously heading out Butcher Country, but rather than heading down the Jamison-Lacola Road on the straight run, it takes a little bit more time, but nowhere near as much as what it did on this trip with the way the conditions were. But it's really picturesque. Now, for anyone that was familiar with the high country around the 2000s and through the 90s, this is how most of the bridges were, what's coming up here, and they all got replaced in the early 2000s, or most of them. This is one of the ones that still survive here coming up onto Bull Plain. Now, I was a little bit over it here, so I packed the camera away, and there's virtually no footage from Bull Plain Road right the way back up to Tamboretha Saddle. We were out of the snow line pretty much that whole time, but there was some great views working the way down the back road there into Lacola of a lot of the snow that was up around on the mountains. And here we are coming up out the other side of Lacola now, and we're starting to come back into the snow. And the snowfall here was exceptional. We travelled out the high country through snow seasons, taking the kids out and all that for decades, but to see the snow that was on the roads during this dump is really, I can't remember another time where I'd seen so much snow over such a big distance. So from now, where we're getting into it now, we're still not right the way up to Tamboretha Saddle. But heading across to Moroka and Billygoat's Bluff Track, I was about a third the way down Billygoat's Bluff Track before the snow stopped. Just incredible, right the way across the top of the mountains there. Because we've climbed all the way up there for the last half an hour, you can see the temp gauge has finally come to the party, and we're up at the minimum because the engine's been working hard. The light above that is the transmission temperature light, and the old ZF's starting to get a little bit tired. It's done a big K's, this one. It's just incredible automatic. But it's time she's going to need a rebuild, because the clutches, what gets the temperature up is the clutches start slipping. And they really warm that automatic up. And the first telltale sign is that light coming on big hill climbs. How's this? There's just nothing more Australian high country, Victorian high country, than these cattle yards up in the snow line. What a picture. It's just absolutely stunning. You just love the chute going up in between those two big gum trees, and the snow sitting on those hand-sawn posts. Just spectacular. I was going to drive in the yards and film it, but it just would have ruined it for someone else that may have come up there and wanted to take photos of the yards by having some clown leaving tyre tracks in the middle of it. Starting to get bloody cold again. Getting closer up the road to Howard. Temperature gauge is starting to drop into disco again. I'm not sure whether I've mentioned it here or whether it was on Instagram, but these 300 and 200 TDIs were so well developed for the military contracts because they had to operate in the most extreme temperatures on the planet, and they're so well cooled that you can drive around without the fan on them even in the middle of summer, 40, 50 degree heat, just as long as you don't start climbing mountains with them. They'll start to get pretty hot then, but yeah, you can drive around the city. I used to drive around with the fan off the whole year when I was living in Melbourne. I've even driven across the Simpson Desert without the fan on in the middle of summer. They're just a really, really well designed engine. Speaking of armies, there's the patrol army. So what I normally would have done with this when there was such a snow dump and all the gates, this is pre-gates being locked, so you could drive all the way to the end. I would have normally just stopped what I was doing and driven up to Howard, then come back to the junction and still headed over to Morocco. But because the treacherous was so treacherous in there around the Barkly River and I lost a heap of time, I ended up just turning off and heading over to Morocco. But I would have, the snow all the way up to Howard would have been spectacular. But it was more important that I get over and down Billy Goats and to the river to dry out the swag that had got wet that night before up in the snow line. And as it was, I missed that deadline. It was Billy Goats in the dark with snow. Tempting fate here, flying the drone backwards in the snow, in low light. thanks for watching again. In the next one, there's some pretty spectacular footage coming up as well.